A reading from the Acts of the Apostles. When the apostles had come together, they asked him, "Lord, is this the time when you will restore the kingdom to Israel?" He replied, "It is not for you to know the times or periods that the Father has set by his own authority. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you. And you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." When he had said this, as they were watching, he was lifted up, and a cloud took him out of their sight. While he was going and they were gazing up toward heaven, suddenly 2 men in white robes stood by them. They said, "Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking up toward heaven? This Jesus, who has been taken up from you into heaven, will come in the same way as you saw him go into heaven." Then they returned to Jerusalem from the mount called Olivet, which is near Jerusalem, a Sabbath day's journey away. When they had entered the city, they went to the room upstairs where they were staying. Peter and John and James and Andrew, Philip and Thomas, Bartholomew and Matthew, James son of Alphaeus, and Simon the Zealot, and Judas son of James. All these were constantly devoting themselves to prayer, together with certain women, including Mary the mother of Jesus, as well as his brothers. Here ends the reading. In the early days of Christianity, many considered the Feast of the Ascension the crown of all Christian festivals. But today, the Ascension is one of those church holy days that is somewhat of a mystery to us. We're not sure what to do with it. On the Episcopal Church calendar, Ascension Day is one of the 7 principal feasts. But it has the disadvantage of always occurring on a weekday, always on a Thursday to be exact, 40 days after Easter. And there are no major traditions, such as giving gifts, associated with it. Have you ever heard someone say, "Hey, check out my new Ascension Day outfit"? Probably not. Growing up in the Methodist Church, not that I remember every sermon, I can't say that I remember ever hearing one about the Ascension. The whole idea of Jesus rocketing upward through the air into heaven is more than a little odd for some. So it is not too difficult to let it pass by relatively unnoticed as we make our way on the liturgical calendar from Easter to Pentecost, often not sure of exactly what to make of it. But perhaps, as those early Christians believed, it deserves more than that. And for that reason, I'm focusing on the first lesson in our lectionary readings for this Sunday, as it references the Ascension. We are, in fact, in the interim between Easter Day and Pentecost. And we do, in fact, live our lives in an interim in many other ways. We graduate from college and seek a job. We are ill and wait for healing. We live in the midst of world conflict and pray for it to cease. We currently exist in an interim as a result of the coronavirus, wondering when and if life will ever return to normal. The first followers of Jesus also lived in an interim time. At the beginning of the book of Acts, the risen Christ instructs the disciples to stay in Jerusalem and wait for the coming of the Holy Spirit. They do this for 40 days, which recalls Moses at Mount Sinai and Jesus in the wilderness. "Lord," the disciples asked Jesus, "is this the time that your kingdom is going to come?" "No," Jesus says, "it is not for you to know that. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you will be my witnesses." And then Jesus ascends to heaven, and 2 men in white robes ask the disciples, "Why do you stand looking up to heaven? This Jesus, who has been taken up from you into heaven, will come in the same way as you saw him go into heaven." In other words, he is going to come back. In his commentary on the Ascension, former professor and chaplain at Harvard, Peter Gomes, suggests that the event of the Ascension includes 2 visions, an upward vision and a downward vision. The upward vision is heaven, and the afterlife. Jesus says, "I go to prepare a place for you." Living with our anxieties and fears and the troubles of this world, we want to be lifted up. We seek the heavenly kingdom. We need an upward vision. But there is also the downward vision, and this downward vision is expressed by the question, why are you looking up toward heaven? In other words, look around you. There is more to do right here, right now. I might differ slightly from Peter Gomes, and instead of downward, say that it is more of a horizontal vision, the need to look beside and around us. The work of the church goes on as the needs of the world persist. There are the hungry to be fed, the thirsty to be given a drink, the homeless to be given shelter, and the suffering to be comforted. And for them, an upward vision alone won't do. As Desmond Tutu once said, "A church that tries to pacify us, telling us not to concentrate on the things of this world but the other, the next world, deals with pie in the sky when you die. And I am not interested, nobody is interested, in post-mortem pies. People around the world want their pies here and now." We live in the interim, gripped by both an upward and a downward or horizontal vision. But like all Christian ideas, the ascension must relate to what life is like on the ground, in the here and now. So amid the troubles of this world and our desire to be lifted up, how might we more fully live into this pandemic-initiated interim that is our current reality? I think we might follow the lead of the disciples, who after the ascension returned to Jerusalem to wait, as they had been instructed, and resolved to see what would happen next. And waiting is hard. For me, it is one of the things that I personally struggle with the most, even when life is much closer to normal. I can very much relate to the classic Tom Petty song, "You take it on faith, you take it to the heart. The waiting is the hardest part." But not only did the disciples wait, they did two other significant things worth pointing out. They stayed together and they prayed. While not physically together, our faith communities have and will need to continue to stay together, albeit in new and innovative ways. To be a true community requires effort in the best of times. They stayed together and they prayed. And we continue to pray for strength, to make sense of our lives and put things in perspective, and for guidance. As Will Willimon, retired Methodist bishop and current professor at Duke Divinity School, writes, "Waiting, an onerous burden for us computerized and technically impatient moderns who live in an age of instant everything, is one of the tough tasks of the church. Our waiting implies that the things which need doing are beyond our ability to accomplish solely by our own effort, our programs and crusades. Some other empowerment is needed, and therefore the church waits and prays." There are many artistic depictions of the ascension. Salvador Dali shows Jesus from the disciples' point of view and some heavenly being receiving him. There is a famous icon showing just the feet of Jesus as he goes into the clouds and leaving footprints on the rock below. If you did an image search on the internet, you would find thousands and thousands of results. And the Gospels also have varying accounts. At some time, Jesus parted from his followers, and there was a sense that they would not see him again in quite the same way. But as he left them, it was as though the heavens opened again, as when Jesus was baptized, at the crucifixion when the curtain of the temple was torn in two. So at this event, the doorway to the full reality of God was wide open, and it has never been closed since. Soon enough, we will celebrate the Spirit of the Lord as it descended on the people at Pentecost. For now, though, the ascended Jesus calls us to be his body, alive and present here and now, to be about the Spirit's ongoing work, waiting, staying together, and praying. In such a way, with the eyes of our hearts enlightened, we may know what is the hope to which he has called us. A hope made visible and tangible and practical in a world in which hope often seems in short supply. Take it on faith and take it to the heart. Amen.